Welcome to the T8 Maker channel. In today's video, we're going to take a look at printer maintenance, specifically Bambu Lab Carbon X1, but the principles that apply to this apply to everything. So the materials that you need, the things you need to take a look at, the things you need to maintain, it's the same in every single printer, but in specific for this demo, you will see Carbon X1. So if you don't have a Carbon X1 printer, this may still be useful to you if you're new to 3D printing. If you do have a Carbon X1, this will be very useful for you if you're new to printing. If you've been doing printing for years and you've been maintaining your printer, you're probably not going to get anything new in this, so feel free to skip on past this video and look out for some of my next videos. In the meantime, if you do enjoy this video and you get something out of it, please share it with your social medias. Please hit that like button and hit the subscribe so that you'll be notified of future videos. Thank you again. Let's get stuck in. Okay, so printer maintenance. Why? Surely if you just leave the printer running, it'll be fine. It'll just keep printing. Not a problem. And maybe you've been using it for years and never touched it and it's never had a problem, and that's fantastic. But as with every moving part, there will always be wear and tear in a printer. If you don't grease the metal parts, they'll wear away. If you don't clean down the rods, the print head might not be able to move as freely as it needs to, or it'll be sloppy. And if you don't clean out all of the crap that gets inside of your printer, you're creating a risk of fire, you're creating a risk of materials getting stuck in some of the mechanical parts. So it makes sense to get in there and clean it out. So how often do you need to clean your printer out? There's no golden rule. It depends on how much you use it. It depends on what you use it for. It depends on the materials that you're using. It depends on the precision that you need. It depends on how complex your machine is. Generally, I would suggest that you at least clean it out on a weekly basis and make sure that there's no materials lying around inside. But if you're talking about re-greasing or cleaning down some of the rods, opening up some of the mechanical parts and checking them, it's probably, once a month or once every 100 or so prints. It's worth doing those things in order to make sure that the printer continues to function correctly. So as part of the maintenance tasks, what do you need to do? The first and most important thing is keep your printer clean. So don't leave filament pieces lying around inside the printer. Don't leave them lying around inside the machinery. There's a couple of reasons you don't want to do this. Well, firstly, it looks untidy, but secondly, it risks getting caught in some of the mechanical parts. But even more importantly, a printer is something that gets hot and you have lots of plastic lying around inside, and you have electronics and you have power supplies. There's always a risk of fire. Cleaning it out, make sure that you minimize those risks, especially if you do unattended printing or you leave your printer on and you're not in the room. It's definitely important to clean it down. You probably want to do that, depending on how anal you are about your cleaning, you probably do it after every print or after every couple of prints or once a day, and certainly once a week, just to keep that printer clean, keep everything right. So that's the first task you need to do. It's pretty simple. Get a hoover, get a brush, get some kind of a dustpan, clean it out, remove all of those filament pieces, throw them in the bin or throw them in whatever you use to collect your filament pieces, if you're looking to do some recycling in the future. But do it weekly at the very least. It'll keep your printer clean, it'll keep it looking well, it'll keep it operating well, and it'll reduce the risk of fire or any other issues, clogging, etc. So that's the first task you need to do, and that's the most regular task you need to do. Next, you want to take a look at moving parts. Now there's lots of moving parts inside the printer, but what you need to do is you need to make sure that anything that has friction on it is cleaned and greased. Get a cloth with some isopropanol rubbing alcohol, spray it on the cloth and wipe down any of the moving parts, any of the bars. Basically, I use it for everything. I will wipe the whole printer down with it. Obviously I don't spray it on electronics. This is your friend when it comes to cleaning down the inside of your printer. A lot of the filaments that you use, like ABS, leave residues inside the printer. It's like a little layer of almost plastic materials, and you need to get rid of it. Isopropanol is the best. It's also great at removing the grease. So when you want to remove the grease from the spindles, this is great stuff for breaking it down and removing it. Use the isopropanol along with some paper towels to rub down the inside of the printer, to also rub down the guide screws and remove any grease that remains on the printer. In my particular case, I had some trouble getting some of the grease that I needed in order to put on the spindles. So as a temporary measure, I bought this multi-purpose lithium grease. As you can see, it's not great stuff, and I wouldn't recommend using it. But it did for a temporary solution. So in this particular case, going through this maintenance, I use the isopropanol alcohol to wipe down the lead screws and remove the lithium grease. Now I found these little printable tools on Maker World. These were convenient little, sponge holders that you can use. You can spray the isopropanol into the sponge, and then you can run the sponge up and down the printer. It'll get into all the little nooks and crannies of the lead screw, which is very important if you want to remove, bad grease. So I purchased this. I actually got it shipped from the US. This is the super lube that's recommended for the print. So this is the multi-purpose synthetic grease with PTFE in it, and this is what's recommended. PTFE helps with the lubrication of the lead screws and the smooth moving of the bed up and down. And so this one I found very, very good. This was purchased, as I say, on Amazon. This is what it looks like. It's pretty messy to put on. This one here is 14 ounces or 400 grams, and that's way overkill. 100 be more than enough for you, 50 even, and that'll probably last you for a couple of years, greasing up the screws on your printer. So that's the stuff you use, and as you go through the process, you clean off the existing, and then again there was another tool that I found on Maker World. It's just a little scoop, a little semicircle. You can put some of the grease on it, and then you can just run it up and down the lead screws, and that will just get the grease around the lead screws. Honestly, I don't think that tool works really well. You could probably use your finger and it'll be a lot better. Anytime I've applied it before, I've just applied it with my finger. You just put some on your finger, just run it up the lead screw, and then just move the bed up and down. And as you move the bed up and down, that will move the grease into all of the corners that need to do. So you don't need to turn off the printer to do this. In fact, you need the printer on in order to apply the grease, because you'll need it to do the cleaning, to move the bed, to clean each of the lead screws, and then you'll also need to move the bed in order to run the grease up and down and get it into all the nooks and crannies of your lead screw. So that's greasing. The next thing to do is the X and Y axis of your printer. The X being the left to right and the Y being the front to back. So on the X axis you have two carbon rods on the Carbon X1. You clean those down with isopropanol alcohol, as with the other. Same with the Y axis, that's the front to back, which are metal. You clean them down with isopropyl alcohol. Same thing as before. You can either get one of the sponge tools, which works, they work okay. You spray a bit of alcohol on and you rub the rod down, and then you move the head and then you rub the rod down. So you can move the head all the way to the left, rub the rod down, move it all the way to the right, rub the rod down, and that way you'll get the full end to end of the rod. So that'll remove any residue or any dust that's on the carbon rods. Extremely important, do not put lube on your carbon rods. It's the purpose of the carbon is to lubricate, so it doesn't require any lube. So do not put lube on your carbon rods. Very important. On your y-axis, which is the metal rods on the side that move the head unit back and forth, there you can put some grease on after you've cleaned it down. So you clean it down, just put a tiny amount of grease. It doesn't really need much at all. Wipe them both down with the isopropanol. Only put grease on the metal rods, not on the carbon rods. Don't put anything on the carbon rods whatsoever. And that's you're done. You've cleaned the rods. If you haven't already done your lead screws, do your 3 lead screws. So that's 1 at the back and there's 2 at the side. So make sure you do the 2 at the side and then do the 1 at the back, all the way from the bottom to the top. Use the isopropanol alcohol, clean off the lead screws, then use the super lube grease to grease them back up. Again, just a dab on your finger, run it down the lead screw on each of the 3, and then just move the bed up and down, its full length until it's spread the grease all the way. If there's any excess, just get a cloth, wipe it off. Don't leave it there because it's just going to get messy and collect dirt. So you don't want to over grease the lead screws. You don't want to over grease the rods. If you put too much grease on, it just collects dirt. The dirt sticks to it, and then as your head moves back and forth and your bed moves up and down, it catches that dirt and it just grinds it up and down the metal rods and wear away those rods, whether it's the Y rods or it's the Z rods, the lead screws. So very important not to put too much grease on. It doesn't require a lot of grease. Just a tiny bit in your finger, run it down the lead screw, move it up and down. As I say, same with the Y, tiny bit on your finger, just run it along. Try to run it around all sides and then just move the head back and forth and it'll move that grease in. So, and clean off all excess. Just get a cloth, clean it off. If you're unsure, just run the cloth, a dry cloth across it, and that'll lift off any excess that's on it. So the next thing you want to check are the belts on the X and Y. So there's a couple of things you want to do. First, you want to inspect them to make sure that there's no cracks or breaks in them. So if you look along the belt, look for any cracks, breaks, broken teeth on the belt. If you see any, then you need to replace the belt. No exceptions. You should absolutely replace the belt as soon as possible. Generally, the belts are pretty good. They'll last a while. You generally don't need to replace them very often. I mean, I've had my printer a year. I've never had to replace it. I have a Prusa printer as well. I've never had to replace the belts on it. It's been working fine. But what I have had to do is tighten the belts. So from time to time, you will need to go in and just tighten the belts. So on the Carbon X1, that's at the back of the printer. There are 2 little notches. You just loosen off the screws on the 2 notches. There are 2 little brackets, and then you just pull it tight and then tighten the screw. You don't need it super tight. It just needs to have a little bit of elasticity to it. If you pull on the belt, you just want the belt to move just ever so slightly with tension. So it's pulling, so as soon as you let go, it goes straight back to where it was. But you don't want it being able to pull way out, or you don't want it to be loose where you let go of it and it doesn't go back to where it was. So just make sure it's pulled tight. That will help keep the head in precision in as far as place where it's located, because the motors, the stepping motors, will be able to move the head accurately. So inspect the belt for any damage, cracks, missing teeth. If there's anything like that, replace the belt immediately. Then check the tension on the belt. Make sure the tension on the belt is finger tight. So that's the main moving parts. The next thing you want to check is your print head. Probably one of the most important components. You want to make sure that it's functioning correctly. You want to make sure that there's no burn marks or anything inside it. You want to make sure that the head isn't worn away. So there's no real hard and fast rule on this. What I do is I take the head and I take the extruder unit out, and I'll take an inspection of them, take a look and see if they're functioning correctly. Is anything jammed in them, any broken teeth, anything loose or falling about. I'll check all the cables to make sure that they're not broken, damaged in any way, that there's no burn marks on any cables. So in this particular case, I've been using the printer quite a bit for carbon fiber printing, and one of the things in my recent reviews, as you've seen, was that the XYZ calibration cube, I couldn't get it to print accurately. So this is another reason for doing the maintenance, is to make sure that your calibration is correct and accurate. So in order to make sure that's the case, you want to make sure that your lead screws are well greased. You want to make sure that your X and Y core axis is clean and moving well. But you also want to make sure that your head isn't worn. And because I've been printing with carbon fiber quite a bit, I just took the opportunity to replace the full print head. Now, you don't need to replace the full print head. You can reuse components of the print head like the fan, etc. So you just want to make sure that if you're printing a lot with abrasives like carbon fiber, that you replace your head every so often, just to be on the safe side. It's very difficult to determine if your head is worn away because you're going to have to clean all of the filament out of it, and then you're going to have to get a set of calipers and then maybe measure it, and you might be able to tell if it's slightly worn. But realistically, after printing a couple of rolls of carbon fiber filament, you should probably consider changing the head, if for no other reason than to just see if there's a difference. So print a calibration cube. If it's off, do all your calibrations and adjustments, clean down all your lead screws, etc. Print another one. If it's still off, take the head out, replace it with a different head, print another calibration, and see if it fixes it. So that's what I've done in this particular case. I just removed the whole head. I will service that head later on. In other words, I'll take all the parts off it, the fans, the heater units, all of that, and I will reuse anything that's reusable. I'm also going to melt and clear out the head and see if I can check if that head is actually worn or not. It's a hardened steel, so it shouldn't wear too easy, but it's worth doing anyway. The other thing when you have the head out is to check your filament feeder. So this is a spare one I have, but I went through the unit, took a look at it. I didn't see any issues with it, so it's gone back in. So there's no reason to replace it unnecessarily. If it ever breaks, I'll replace it. But for now, it's good. It went back in along with the new printer head. Also, while the casing was off, I just inspected the head very quickly just to see if there's any signs of any burning or any damage. Again, the head can get to a couple hundred degrees. The risk of burning inside is quite substantial, so it's best to just check that. Check there's no damage to the cables. Check there's no damage to the head. There's no damage to the board inside. There's no damage to the casing. So there was no damage. So in my case, it's all gone back together. Good as new. The other thing you need to replace, and there's a couple of places where you need to replace this, from the head to the back of the printer, from the back to the filament tube, and if you have an AMS, from the filament tube up to the AMS, and potentially even the AMS inside itself. You rip out your PTFE tubes and replace them. After printing carbon fiber, a couple of rolls, the inside of the PTFE tube is going to get worn down. While some wear inside of these PTFE tubes is not really a problem, it's no harm replacing them because there may be rough surfaces somewhere in here that might catch and slow down filaments. It's not important. You can, you don't have to waste your PTFE tubes replacing them all the time, but it's been about a year I've had the printer. It's time to replace the PTFE tubes because I wanted the printer back to new state so that there was nothing particularly worn or broken on it. So do that if you can. If you don't have the PTFE tubes that come with the kits that Bambu Lab sells, just make up your own. So just get a PTFE roll and just cut it to size. There's a couple of different sizes you need in order to support it. As I say, there's no real reason. Those PTFE tubes are fine, if a little bit wide, just from getting worn down a little bit. But they're still functioning, they're still workable, and they're still usable, so I won't be throwing them out. I'll just be repurposing them to something else. So the last thing that I did is a general inspection of the printer. So for this, in this particular case with the Bambu Lab Carbon X1, I took the back off. I mean, if you've got a Prusa Mark III, obviously there's no backs to take off, but you know, there are other things you need to consider with that one. You need to just open up the main board and just check the board is okay and there's no issues with the board. And my particular Prusa Mark 3S, I had to tighten all the screws on it. Every single screw on the printer had gotten loose. So the last time I did a maintenance on that one, I had to tighten all of the screws, and it made a huge difference. So if your bed is banging or something like that on a Prusa, or if you have a bed slinger and it's banging and clattering, just check the screws, just make sure they're all tight. Generally it should be fine, but yeah, when things moving around and banging back and forth, it will loosen the screws, so just tighten them. But for the Carbon X1, what I did was I took the back off. I took the back off because there's a power supply down in the bottom left hand corner, and there's also a board on the right hand side, and then there's a lead screw at the back as well, and there's a big gaping hole all the way from the top to the bottom, from the inside of the print chamber to the back of the printer, so stuff falls in there all the time. When I checked it, that's exactly what I found. I found little bits of filament lying around inside, so I took a blower to it, blew all the filament out, and then took a hoover and cleaned up all around that particular area. It's very important. As I say, you've got a power supply there that can get quite hot. You've got motherboard and controller board. You've got all of the different components in there. It's best to keep it clean, so I just cleaned it out. While I was cleaning it, I just took a quick inspection of everything to make sure there was no smoke or burn marks anywhere. There wasn't anything, so that was fine. And then I put it all back together again, just cleaned everything down, just gave everything a final wipe and clean down, and then put it back in its place and did a calibration. Very important before you do anything else, just to make sure that the printer calibrates itself and gets back into a working order, because you've moved things, you've adjusted things, especially the belts, etc. So change the head, so different head on it. So doing a calibration, just make sure that everything is functioning correctly. So after the calibration, I printed out this calibration cube just to get an idea of what it was going to look like, and had it made any improvements, because as I say, when I did my last review, filament review, the calibration cube wasn't coming out with some great measurements, so I decided to run a quick test, and it should be 20 by 20 by 20, and should be 20 by 20 by 20, and as we can see, we're getting pretty consistent numbers across the board. So I'm very happy with that. The maintenance that was done seemed to improve the calibration cube. It's not perfect yet, but it's a vast improvement. Just goes to show that maintaining your printer, greasing the lead screws, cleaning down all the rods, cleaning out all the crap, putting a new filament, putting a new printer head in, changing the PTFE, all helps in making sure that you have a better print experience. So I hope this was useful. If you're already been doing maintenance and I haven't added anything to anything you're doing, if you have any other tips for things that can be done to maintain the printer, please put them down in the comments for everybody to see, so that we can, if there's something that we're missing that we're not doing, that we can ensure that we're doing that going forward. If you haven't printed before and you've tried some of these maintenance tasks and you've had problems with them, put that in the comments as well. Certainly I'd love to understand some of the problems people are having and try and see if we can't find some solutions for everybody. So enjoy your printing, look after your printer, and it'll last you a long time and give you some great results. Please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't hit the subscribe button, share this video on your social media. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. It's been a couple of months since I've done a video. It's like 3 months or something like that since I released a video. And now that we've passed 1,000 subscribers, I'm feeling somewhat guilty about that I haven't got any videos out for you guys. I want to thank you guys for subscribing and for helping support the channel. So it's on my radar to get some videos out now. Unfortunately, I had some family and some work that I needed to take care of that's made it difficult to get videos out for the last couple of months. So hopefully that's all taken care of and should be able to get some videos out. Just to give you an idea of what's on the pipeline for things I have planned. I did go out and get 2 more rolls of carbon fiber filaments that I wanted to test out. So I have the new Bambu Lab Carbon Fiber Nylon. I also have this Cheetah Tech. So Cheetah Tech PET carbon fiber, which still sealing its bag there, but I want to get the test on that as well. And I also have another eSun carbon fiber that I wanted to test out as well. These are just filaments that I've purchased myself. I just want to try them out and see what they're like. I'm hoping to have a few other things come along the pipeline over the next couple of months, get them out. So it's one of those cases where I want to put the time into a video and give you something that's useful rather than just churning content out for the sake of churning content out. So I'll get to these and hopefully get some videos out in the future. I want to thank you for your support for the channel, and you know, I hope that you continue to get value out of what we're doing here. And if you have any thoughts or ideas or any comments on what you'd like to see, you know, please do let me know, and we'll try and do what we can to get it done.